What's up everybody, it's Robin Gaming here. So this is it, this is the game. You probably all know it, but Uncharted 2 Among Thieves, I still remember it so well. When the game came out in 2009, I had just played Drake's Fortune about 6 months prior to that. I'd been really looking forward to the sequel, and my expectations were seriously this high. But once again, I remember it so well that the game came out and it pretty much blew those expectations completely out of the water to the point where, you know, I literally felt like at that point it was the best game I had ever played. And you saw that in terms of the, you know, Game of the Year awards. It got the perfect scores and stuff. And still to this date, I find the game absolutely amazing. And the funny thing really is that replaying it now on the PlayStation 4, I've beaten it on crushing, and it just amazes me how it manages to every single time, you know, do it again. It just blows me away, and I'm like, man, I can't believe this game is just that good. So this is not going to be your typical review. You probably all know kind of like, you know, what the game is about, and you know, what, like in terms of gameplay, in terms of story, value, all those kinds of regular aspects I talk about in a review. No, I thought I'd kind of like do something different here, and I'm simply going to talk about the things that make this game stand out, especially compared to the other Uncharted games in the series, why I think this is the best one, and why this game is so incredibly good, you know, in my personal opinion, okay? So that's what this is going to be about, my review for Uncharted 2 Among Thieves, why it is that incredible. So, I am going to start off here with the thing that I really think makes it the best Uncharted game, and that I think also made it stand out so much on itself, and that is really what I simply would call the pacing to it. It has two aspects. First of all, it is the sort of natural progression through levels. Of course, you know, Nathan Drake goes looking for the certain Jintamani stone while being followed by a villain, and it's this typical Indiana Jones type story. The Uncharted games have never had an amazing story or anything like that. It has always been pretty predictable, where you know that in the end they're probably not gonna end up with the actual treasure itself, right? It gets lost somehow, and the villains are, you know, being gotten rid of, I guess. You know, they always die at the end, or simply won't follow Drake anymore for whatever reason. That's kind of the thing. So yeah, you know, story in itself isn't anything special like that, but it's the way that they tell its story that I think is so awesome, and Uncharted 2, hands down in my opinion, does the best job at that, because natural progression is my first point. And what I mean by that is that, and I've said this many times in videos, from chapter 5 on in Nepal, Drake goes on this continuous adventure from location to location, and it all happens supernaturally, where the first, you know, like 6 chapters of the game take place in Nepal. From there on, Drake gets on the train, it crashes, falls down, Drake, you know, wakes up into this like snowy environment where they already were before. From that point on, he gets found by Tenzin, goes to Tibet that way, gets on the trucks after the big battle, you know, rides to the monastery where Shambhala is located. It is told in such an incredible way where you don't feel like anything is cut, or that they needed to, you know, go to a specific place to do this one set piece that they wanted to do. You don't have that feeling at all, and that was really one of my complaints with Uncharted 3, but I'll get into that with my review on that. I just love the way the story on itself is told from location to location. The very first 4, you know, chapters of the game are just the intro. It's the cliffhanger, it's the museum heist, and then the 2 Borneo chapters, just to kind of like set everything up, from the villain to the story premise to the characters. And I think it does that in a great way, and then really chapter 5 is the start of the game where it gets going and it will never stop. So also there's just a great variety in gameplay in terms of pacing, from gunplay to platforming to puzzles, even some boss fights in there they throw in, and you know, that is basically the entire formula of Uncharted. But in this one, hands down, it feels the best, I guess the most well worked out, because at no point did I feel like, oh man, these gunfights keep dragging on so much, or after one that you're immediately getting another one. No, they always switch it up by having you play this, you know, platforming piece where you simply get to breathe a bit, you know, after a certain big fight that you had, and you can simply, you know, platform through this environment, or maybe solve a certain puzzle, and it does a great job at that. You notice that when, for example, during a really, you know, epic scene where Drake, you know, kind of like crashes or something and falls down, then the moment he will actually start moving again is the moment you as a player touch the joystick again, because you actually want to walk, or you want to, you know, basically start walking, because even you as a player have to kind of like breathe out from everything that happened. It does that so great, and I love it for that. Second of all, there's the theme, you know, the Nepalese, Tibetan sort of like environments everywhere. As I said, you go from Borneo to Nepal to this beautiful train scene, of course, where you're just driving through a big epic set piece where the weather changes constantly. You go from this lush jungle environment to a big snowy environment. In the end, you know, stuff like the sanctuary and Shambhala itself, yeah, just beautiful locations. And also the soundtrack really adds to that, because, you know, it's super fitting. It doesn't have that many great tracks, but you know, all of them are super memorable and are really well timed with the gameplay and with the certain scenes that, yeah, absolutely adore that. Then the third out of the 4 big pillars of this game that I think make it stand out is the characters. Of course, Chloe is new in this game, and they didn't have to, you know, introduce Chloe to the game at all. They had a great cast with Drake, Sully, and Elena, but no, they did decide to actually add, you know, just a big main character in there being Chloe, and that made for some awesome situations, which I'll get into. And then also there's 2 great new villains. I thought Eddie Raja in the first game was awesome, but, you know, Lazarevich and Flynn are just once again also great new additions that, you know, that I think really added to the story of it. You know, Flynn is this guy who you're meant to hate, but at the same time he's kind of likable because you know what type of character he is, and he's constantly making you know, funny remarks at Drake, that kind of stuff. They have this sort of like, you know, a battle between themselves going on, right, and that's just awesome. Lazarevich at the same time is super frightening. You know, he kills his own men just to prove a point to Drake, and he has an awesome, you know, accent to himself, this Russian war criminal that he is. Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love the new characters in this game that you only find in Uncharted 2. It's just, yeah, it's a great cast of characters for sure. Finally, last of all, it is really the writing of Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. As I said, Chloe was introduced, and what that made for was this inner battle between Chloe and Elena. They're constantly making remarks at each other, trying to, you know, they have this big battle because they're both kind of jealous of each other, because they, you know, like Drake, for example. So Elena, when she says, I'm last year's model, just to like prove a point, yeah, that's just, it's funny as hell to me. And the game really had some of these incredible moments like that, that I didn't find in any of the other ones. And also jokes, you know, Drake versus Flynn in that scene in chapter 23 where, you know, they're just like climbing through this environment trying to find the gate to Shambhala. Meanwhile, they see the statue, and obviously because Flynn betrayed Drake just calls out to Flynn as you're like pretty much platforming towards us through this environment. He says, "Statue of your mom." Stuff like that. Where do you find that in any other game? You simply don't. I remember chapter 2 with Flynn and Drake, where, you know, Flynn is like, there's a guy above you, there's a guy above you. Drake sees him, you pull him down pretty much, and then all of a sudden through the radio you hear, there's a guy below you, there's a guy below you. And I still remember in 2009 playing the game for the first time, looking below, because I just thought he had literally made a remark about the game itself and that there was a guy below me, until I actually realized, oh wait, he's talking about the guy I just pulled down. That is the sort of humor that I really don't find in any other game, and it makes this, like, it makes it such an awesome experience that, yeah, I haven't seen that kind of writing in any other game before. And as I said, Uncharted 2 just nails it down perfectly. Yeah, constant confrontation also between Drake and the enemy. For example, you will have some confrontations with Lazarevich throughout the game that are just super frightening, and you at all times have this sense of that you're being chased by something, or, you know, people are chasing you, right? They're following you throughout the adventure, so you have to hurry up. Like, it does it just great. The writing in this game is absolutely awesome. Now, those are kind of the 4 things that make it stand out so much, right? Does the game have flaws? Totally it does. For example, there's a stealth system introduced which really isn't that, you know, advanced or anything like that. You simply sneak up from enemies and try to, like, with the press of one button, kill them very easily like that. And the game tries to kind of like switch it up sometimes where you can get through certain environments by taking out all the enemies stealthily. But it doesn't always work out super well because, as I said, it's very basic. But at the same time, I've encountered parts where I was able to kill all enemies, then I tried to move on, and all of a sudden the game spawns other enemies right behind me to instantly kill me because they didn't want me to basically complete that part in pure stealth. And that happened, for example, in the part where Drake is moving through the ice environment in chapter 15. And yeah, you know, that's a little flaw. Also, that Drake is really like a mass murderer who is constantly making funny remarks and seems to be this humorous person who you have to relate to. But at the same time, at the end of the game, you've killed 700 guys or something, and that's pretty insane, right? So, but those, you know, once again, it's just a gameplay element to it. I can kind of like accept that. It's part of the gameplay itself. It's part of what the game is. So I myself just don't have too big of a problem with that. In the end though, Uncharted 2 is such an amazing game, especially for the reasons I just stated. And I think I seriously think it's you know, the best game I've ever played personally. It's the best experience. I've beaten it 10 times on PlayStation 3 or maybe even more, and going back to it now on PlayStation 4, I once again realized, man, this game, I can't believe how it manages to impress me every single time again. So I truly think it is what comes closest to being a perfect game, and it's most definitely the best game I've played last generation, if not the best game I've played of all time. So it is the one game that for the very first time I am going to give a perfect score of a 10 out of 10. Doesn't mean once again it's a masterpiece, because it does have some slight flaws, but in itself it is such an incredible experience that this is the game I would recommend to anybody. And you can still see it that to this day storytelling has become very important in games, and I still see games coming out that I feel like, oh look, they've taken this, you know, small little part from Uncharted 2. And yeah, I think it really made a big impact on gaming itself, on what games look like these days. So in that way, Uncharted 2, I can't recommend it enough to people to play it, but obviously you need to play Uncharted 1 first to kind of like, you know, get sort of like information on the story and the characters and stuff, because it makes 2 a much better game in that way as well, knowing what these characters have already been through. But that being said, you know, of course it's part of the Nathan Drake collection, so if you have that, of course play them in order, but you'll notice that Uncharted 2 is, you know, at least to me, hands down the best one out of the series, and you're in for a ride, that's for sure. So with that being said, I hope you enjoyed the review. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you did, then leave a quick like, because it really helps out my channel. And then for now, I'd like to thank you a lot for watching, and hope to see you again next time.